We begin tonight with an update on a hiker and his dog missing since mid-October. Jim Barnes went missing near Chetwynd. His truck, along with his personal belongings, were found, but there was no sign of him or his dog Murphy.
When paramedic Jim Barnes set out on October 18, 2024, to enjoy one last hunting trip before the harsh Canadian winter set in, little did he know that his life and the life of his loyal dog Murphy would take a turn that would haunt those left behind. The trip seemed ordinary, another adventure into the deep forests of British Columbia, a place Jim knew like the back of his hand. But what happened next? That's where things get strange. Jim's departure, a routine hunting trip. It was supposed to be just another hunting trip. Jim Barnes, an experienced outdoorsman, had spent countless days in the forests of British Columbia. These woods were his second home. The trees, the winding paths, and the quiet hum of the wilderness were all too familiar to him. This wasn't a man who got lost easily. He knew the land like the back of his hand, each corner of the forest, each rise and fall of the terrain. But this time, something would be different. Before he left, he made a simple request to his partner, Michaela Sawyer, and asked her to come with him. It was a routine trip after all. Michaela, however, had other plans and politely declined. She knew Jim well enough to understand that he loved the solitude of the forest, the quiet time to think and hunt.
He was last seen wearing a TC Energy ball cap, a green or blue hoodie, and jeans. Murphy is an 18-month-old golden retriever with no collar. Anyone with information on the whereabouts or seen him, Murphy, or the pickup back in October is being asked to contact the Chetwynd RCMP.
Murphy was more than just a dog to Jim. She was his constant companion, his hunting partner, and his loyal friend. It was just another day, another hunt, and Michaela didn't think twice as Jim packed up his gear and set off into the wilderness with Murphy trotting happily by his side. This was familiar ground for Jim, an area he had explored many times before while hunting, fishing, and working on local infrastructure projects. He was expected to return the same day and report for his paramedic shift in Fort St. John the next morning. The trip was meant to be brief, and nothing seemed unusual about his departure. Jim was well-equipped, familiar with the terrain, and comfortable navigating the challenging environment of Peace River country. Later that evening, when Jim hadn't returned and failed to make contact, Sawyer grew concerned. This was out of character for him. He was dependable and always checked in, especially before returning from the wilderness. Early the next morning, October 19th, Jim's phone briefly pinged near a Forest Service road south of Fort St. John. This would be the last digital trace of him. Sawyer and two others immediately began searching the area. By noon, they located Jim's gray pickup truck on the side of the road. Inside were his personal belongings, his phone, bag, keys, and firearms, all left behind. The truck door was found ajar. Just an hour after the truck was discovered, heavy snowfall began, adding urgency and difficulty to the search. The silence grows, a mysterious disappearance. The search effort escalated quickly. Given Jim's background and familiarity with the region, friends and searchers were immediately alarmed. The area where he vanished was rugged and unpredictable in October. Weather conditions changed rapidly, and the terrain was dense with downed trees, thick brush, and riverbanks. Wildlife presence was confirmed in the area, grizzly bear tracks and signs of wolves, but no direct evidence of an encounter with Jim was found.
When Barnes didn't return with the couple's 18-month-old red golden retriever named Murphy, Sawyer reported him missing.
We worked in that area for a long time, so we knew that area very well.
An extensive search turned up no sign of Barnes or Murphy.
Initially, only trained teams were allowed to search due to safety concerns. Helicopters were dispatched once the weather improved. Police marked the case as a top priority, but some volunteers later criticized the coordination between RCMP jurisdictions and the follow-through on discovered leads. Could this have been the reason the search came back with nothing of value? Volunteers discovered one of the few concrete clues, a frozen boot print and dog tracks near the river, about 3 kilometers from where Jim's truck was found. However, the trail ended there. No additional evidence was located. The river was not searched thoroughly by police, and boats were not deployed at that time. Weeks passed without progress. Search dogs could not pick up a scent. There was no blood, no signs of a struggle, and no personal effects scattered in the wilderness. Jim had simply disappeared. As the days wore on, those closest to him were left with only questions questions about terrain dangers, possible animal encounters, or even accidental injury. But no theory could be confirmed without physical evidence. Michaela could no longer ignore the hollow sense of fear deep within her gut. Jim had always been a man of routine. He wouldn't have gotten lost. He wouldn't have abandoned Murphy or left her behind. No, something had happened, something that couldn't be explained. And that thought, that terrifying thought, sent a chill down her spine. There was nothing to point toward Jim's location. No blood trail, no sign of a struggle. Not even a whiff of his scent lingered in the air. It was as if Jim had been swallowed by the forest itself, vanishing into the shadows. Michaela held on to hope at first, clinging to the possibility that Jim had just gotten lost, that he was still out there somewhere. But as time dragged on, her hope began to wane, flickering like a candle in the wind. What had happened to Jim and Murphy in that dark forest? What could have happened to them? It was a nightmare that no one, not even Jim's experienced friends, could explain. Murphy returns alone, the shocking discovery. Then something happened, something that no one could have ever predicted. The phone rang. Michaela's heart skipped a beat when she heard the voice on the other end. A local animal shelter had found a dog. In late November, a golden retriever was found emaciated and injured near Mile 95 Road, over 100 kilometers from where Jim Barnes and his dog Murphy had last been seen. The dog's red coat, visible injuries, and anxious behavior led many to believe it might be Murphy.
I was like, wow, like this really looks like my dog, but at the same time, this dog was battered, bruised, broken, swollen, like beyond belief. So swollen. So that was really hard. And anyone who owns a red golden retriever will know, like 98% of them, they all look the same.
At first, Michaela could hardly believe what she was hearing. Could it be Murphy? The thought struck her like a bolt of lightning. Her mind raced, her pulse quickened. How? How could Murphy have traveled so far? How had she ended up alone, so far from where Jim had vanished? The shelter worker continued, telling Michaela about the condition of the dog, severely malnourished, with a broken leg, and clearly terrified. The words seemed to echo in Michaela's mind, and the dread that had been with her from the start came rushing back. Could this truly be Murphy? Could it be the same dog who had vanished with Jim into the wilderness? Michaela barely remembered the drive to the shelter. Her heart was racing in her chest, her thoughts a whirlwind of fear and anticipation. When she arrived and saw the dog for the first time, she stopped dead in her tracks. There, curled in a corner of the shelter, was a dog that looked like Murphy, but it wasn't her. Not anymore. She found it hard to believe her wide-eyed, playful dog was now the dog sitting before her. The golden retriever's once glorious fur was matted and dirty, its once shiny coat now dulled with grime. Her eyes seemed empty, filled with a deep terror that sent a cold shiver down Michaela's spine. There was no recognition in those eyes, just raw fear. The dog that Michaela had known, the dog that had been her constant companion, was now a shadow of itself. Murphy had survived the wilderness, but at what cost? The shelter worker explained that if they had found her even just a few days later, she wouldn't have made it. Murphy had endured days, possibly weeks of suffering, her body broken by hunger, exhaustion, and the harsh conditions of the forest. A broken leg, perhaps from a fall or some kind of traumatic event, had nearly cost her life. And yet, she had fought through it. What could have possibly happened to her in those woods to leave her so broken?
It was a combination of a lot of things, I would say, and a lot of cross-referencing of pictures. And then, again, just certain behavioral things that Murphy exhibits that are like so specific to him.
Murphy's need for constant presence was almost unbearable to witness. She couldn't be left alone. She had become a prisoner to her own fear, her spirit shattered by something that no one could explain. The mystery of Jim's disappearance and Murphy's return grew even darker with each passing moment. No one had the answers. Not the authorities, not the shelter workers, and not Michaela. But there was one thing that was clear. Whatever had happened out there in the wilderness had changed everything. The trauma. What did Murphy witness? For weeks, hope lingered on a fragile thread. Everyone was waiting on the DNA results for the dog with bated breath. At first, it was easy to believe the golden retriever was Murphy. The dog responded calmly to a familiar groomer and didn't resist being walked along routes Jim and Murphy had often taken. For Michaela and others who knew the dog, the resemblance and behavior seemed too specific to be a coincidence. Dogs that have witnessed that much trauma aren't usually as friendly and calm around strangers, so it had to be Murphy, right? Still, doubts lingered. Murphy had not been microchipped or tattooed, and without official identification, there was no way to be certain. RCMP requested a DNA test to verify the dog's identity. Michaela had to be sure. Murphy was a part of her husband. His return would mean her husband was not lost forever. While waiting for the results, Michaela tried to care for the injured animal, posting updates and holding on to the idea that Murphy made it out alive. She wanted to nurse Murphy back to health as soon as possible and refused to believe it could be a stray. Weeks passed. Then, in late January 2025, the RCMP released the results of the test. The golden retriever, while similar in appearance and behavior, was not Murphy. The DNA didn't match. The dog that had sparked a new wave of hope in the search for Jim turned out to be another stray, another mystery. The brief belief that this animal might offer answers to what happened that day in the woods had disappeared just as quickly as it came. The mistaken identity was a setback, not only emotionally, but in terms of the investigation. With the dog ruled out, the question remained, where was the real Murphy? And could the golden retriever found in November have simply been another lost pet? A heartbreaking coincidence in an already mysterious case? Michaela was back to where she began, wondering what could have possibly happened to her husband and their dog in a few short hours. She had lost hope and was close to breaking. At this point, only a miracle could bring back her missing loved ones. The trauma the dog had endured was real, but it wasn't Murphy's story to tell. Jim's companion remained missing, and the questions surrounding his disappearance remained unanswered. Theories about Jim's disappearance. As the days turned into weeks, the theories about Jim's disappearance began to swirl. What had happened to him? Where was he? The natural explanations seemed to falter, unable to provide any real answers. Some believed Jim had fallen victim to one of the many natural predators that roamed the forest, perhaps wolves, which were known to travel in packs, or even a bear. It wasn't out of the question. Wolf tracks had been found near Jim's camp, and the presence of such predators was a common danger in the wild. But there were gaps in this theory, big ones. If wolves had attacked, why was there no sign of a struggle? No blood? No bite marks on Murphy, the dog who had been by Jim's side the entire time? Just the one broken leg. No gnawing, no tearing, no multiple wounds.
A golden retriever found approximately 120 kilometers from Barnes's pickup, briefly promising a potential lead. However, RCMP saying that DNA sampling done on the dog has confirmed that it's not Murphy.
The tracks, though present, seemed to lead nowhere. Then, there was the other possibility. A bear, perhaps a grizzly, known to prowl the forests in this part of British Columbia. They were massive, powerful creatures, capable of causing significant damage. But even this theory didn't fully explain the strange circumstances surrounding Jim's disappearance. His belongings, his rifle, phone and backpack, had been found untouched in his truck. His gear left in place as though Jim had simply stepped away for a moment. But there was no sign of a struggle. No broken branches. No signs of a fight. So where was Jim? What had taken him? Then, the investigation uncovered something that shifted the entire narrative. Something chilling that would forever change the course of the mystery. They found footage on Jim's phone. It wasn't just any footage. It was something that made the blood run cold. The footage appeared to show Jim walking alone through the forest, looking over his shoulder as if he were being followed. But there was no sign of another human being, no other hiker, no other hunter. And there was something else, something far more unsettling. The shape that seemed to be following him wasn't a bear. It wasn't a wolf. It wasn't anything that could be easily explained. It moved too quickly, too silently, blending into the shadows of the forest in a way that seemed unnatural. The figure was there, and then it wasn't. A fleeting presence, something other. What was it? Was this the creature that had been stalking Jim? Had it been watching him from the trees, from the shadows, just waiting for the right moment to strike? And the most chilling question of all, why had Murphy survived when Jim had not? The footage, the strange absence of a struggle, the eerie silence that seemed to follow them both, all of it pointed to something far beyond the natural world. Was this the work of a predator, a bear, or a wolf? Or had something else, something far more elusive, far more intelligent? Theories, wild and terrifying, began to spread. Some believed that Jim had encountered something much darker than an animal, a creature that had been watching him from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Could it have been Bigfoot, the legendary creature known to lurk in the deep forests of British Columbia, its massive form sometimes caught fleetingly in the corner of someone's eye? Could Jim have crossed paths with this elusive, intelligent being, a creature capable of hiding in plain sight, of stalking its prey without ever being seen? The figure in the shadows, the way it moved, the way it followed him, there was something unnerving about it. It wasn't an animal, it wasn't a bear, it wasn't a wolf, but it was something. Something large, something quick, and something that moved with a deliberate, unsettling purpose. No one could explain it. No one could offer a rational explanation for what had happened to Jim Barnes. All that remained was a haunting mystery, one that grew darker with every unanswered question. Brandon Reynolds' survival tale, a shocking similarity. Enter Brandon Reynolds, a survivalist with years of experience in the wild. His tale from Oregon brought an unsettling comparison to Jim's story. One night, while camping with a friend in a remote ravine, they heard a sound, a deep, guttural roar that shook the ground beneath them. The sound wasn't from any animal they knew. It was powerful, resonating deep in their bones. It was a roar that wasn't of this world.
I spent years looking for explanations of the audio recordings I have and can't find any animal that makes any of the sounds that I have recorded. Sasquatch is definitely here in Texas.
Brandon, a seasoned hunter, stood frozen, not by fear of a bear or a wolf, but by the realization that whatever made that sound wasn't something they could fight. It wasn't just an animal, it was something else. After hearing the sound, Brandon and his friend fled, leaving everything behind. When Brandon tried to share the recording of the sound, it was mysteriously taken down. No one would listen, no one would acknowledge it. Could this be the same thing Jim Barnes encountered in the woods? Could it be that Jim heard something massive, something that could shake the very air around him? What if Jim encountered something intelligent, something that waited for the right moment, patiently biding its time before striking? The knocking sounds, Jim's last encounter. Late at night, when the forest was still and only the whisper of the wind could be heard rustling the branches, Jim began hearing strange sounds. At first they were subtle, almost easy to dismiss. A soft knock, faint enough that he could have attributed it to the wind or some animal moving through the woods. But as time passed, the knocking became more pronounced. 3 sharp, deliberate knocks, followed by an eerie, bone-chilling silence. Jim was no stranger to the sounds of the wilderness. He had heard the howls of wolves, the growls of bears, the hoots of owls, and the creaking of trees swaying in the wind. But these knocks, they were different. They weren't natural. They didn't belong in the forest. The noises gnawed at him, pulling him from the calm of his camp and into the restless darkness of the night. No animal would emerge from the shadows. No strange figure would step into the flickering light of his flashlight. Just the stillness of the wilderness pressing in around him, thick and suffocating. As the knocks continued, Jim's unease began to grow. He had always been confident in the woods, in his ability to survive, to navigate the dangers of the wild. But this was different. This wasn't just a bear, a wolf, or even an unfamiliar animal. This was something deliberate, something intelligent. And the silence that followed the knocks was enough to send a shiver down his spine. Eventually, Jim decided he couldn't ignore the sounds anymore. His mind wrestled with what could be causing them, but he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was making the noises was waiting for him to slip up, to let his guard down. The persistence of the knocks, the way they echoed through the trees, made him feel as though something or someone was out there, watching him.
The very first sounds were very aggressive, could be considered very scary, but again, they weren't coming after us, so we don't know the intent, we don't know their agenda, we don't know what it was.
Then Jim's truck was discovered, abandoned and left behind deep in the forest, miles away from where he had been. The door was ajar, the engine cold. His belongings were untouched, his phone still on, his rifle still resting in its place. There were no signs of a struggle, no footprints leading away from the truck, no broken branches or traces of a fight. Jim's gear was exactly where it should have been. The wilderness had kept its secrets, refusing to give up any clues about what had happened. No trace, no answer. And that's when the chilling question began to rise. What had happened to Jim? Was it Bigfoot? The idea of Bigfoot being the cause of Jim's disappearance seemed far-fetched to many. But as more time passed, and as the search for Jim uncovered more eerie details like the knocking sounds, the unexplained stillness, and the strange way Jim's belongings had been left undisturbed, it became impossible to completely dismiss the possibility. The forests of British Columbia had long been rumored to be the home of Bigfoot, with locals recounting stories of sightings, strange howls, and unnerving encounters. Could this creature have been lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike? Waiting until Jim had ventured deep enough into the woods, until he had let his guard down? But Bigfoot isn't just a mindless animal, many theorists argue. Some believe it's not just an oversized primate, but an intelligent being, more clever, more cunning than any predator known to man. Perhaps Bigfoot had learned to avoid humans, to study them, to wait until the right moment to make its move. Could it have been watching Jim, observing his every move, waiting for him to stray too far? And then, when the moment was right, it struck. It took him. But why? The unanswered questions. What really happened to Jim Barnes? Could Jim have crossed paths with something that no human could understand? Something that no one had ever seen before? And what about Murphy's return? What had she experienced in those dark woods? We may never know the answers. The wilderness, it seems, has its own rules. It keeps its secrets locked away, hidden in the thickest parts of the forest, where no one dares to go. The mystery of Jim and Murphy's disappearance is now a part of that darkness, a riddle that will likely never be solved. But one thing is for sure, Jim and Murphy's fate are connected to something far beyond the ordinary. Whatever waits in the forest, whatever took Jim, is still out there, waiting, watching, and biding its time.